Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast on this Wednesday evening for all of you in Europe and America. This is our Flèche Wallonne Men's recap if you're watching on YouTube, or the combined men and women's recap on all podcast players. I know Apple announced something in their slightly dystopian announcements, I always find, actually, about podcast players, but I haven't checked that out yet. Anyway, La Flèche Wallonne, I'm not going to insult your intelligence. It's all about the Mur de Huy at the end, if I'm honest. But for completeness, it's 192 Ks. They do the Mur, a lap of it before, which crests with 32 Ks to go. And then the last climb, 1,300 meters, 9.5%. But then the real nasty sections, 900 meters at 12% with 25% ramps or something obscene. There's not actually like that many hard climbs. Otherwise, throughout this race, Liège is harder, and that's the problem with it. But are you surprised, Benji, that it's under 200 Ks? Do you think the solution for Flèche, would you add more climbs, more Ks to make it 250, 230, another hour of racing to maybe make the last 20 more exciting?
I think that there's a few aspects to this. You first have the fact that there's no real other race like this on the calendar where it's the entire parcours basically preparing for the final wall. And throughout the season itself, we know that we have quite a bit of hill races that are like 250 kilometers or are 200 kilometers that have hills all around that get a different kind of finish. So it's a question whether you want every single race to look relatively the same or be as hard and not give an opportunity to riders that could perhaps do better on parcours like this one, where it's very stressful for the entire day, but not so difficult that you can't be at the foot of the final hill. So I do see the beauty in something like La Flèche Wallonne, but it's just not good for the viewing pleasure, I think, because let's be real, I think the majority of people know that once you look at La Flèche Wallonne, you can just basically wait until the last 5-ish kilometers, and you're 99% sure that nobody else is going to take the victory that attacked beforehand. There's always a possibility that someone attacks on the second or third last hill, but it's just very unlikely to happen with the brutality of the final hill and the way everybody just sprints up it in the end. So, yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
I think the last breakaway winner was in 2003, so it's been a long time between breakaway wins. But before we get into the full recap, I want to mention our show partner, Le Col, the Ardennes Classics. Well, we've got our last one coming up on the weekend, but the Cobble Classics are already done and dusted. But if you want to check out Le Col's new ambassador kit with Johan Museo, they've brought that out. They've posted a story about it, and the link is in the description below about what the Classics and cycling in Flanders means to Johan Museo. So I'd encourage you to go and check that out if you want to read through that as well. There's also Le Col's Level Up Strava Challenge. So if you complete 420 minutes across 3 weeks, if you join this Strava Challenge, you receive a £50 reward upon completion to spend at Le Col. And one person will win £2,500, which infinite Australian dollars of Le Col summer kit. So go and check that out through Le Col's Instagram if you're keen. But the favourites for today's stage, or race rather, Roglic, Julian Alaphilippe, won it twice before, Pidcock, obviously, one of the best classics riders already. But the big news, Benji, UAE and Pogačar out of the race before he even started because of a positive test, which Pogačar and UAE are adamant that it's a false positive for one of their riders and the team members. So they were out despite that rider. I think it might have been ULC, correct me if I'm wrong, Benji, who tested positive for COVID. And then he did 3 tests afterwards, all negative. He tested negative in the days previously, non-symptomatic. So Pogačar didn't seem particularly pleased about that. Anyway, there's a fairly large break. No one was too concerned about it. No favourites in it. No massive talents like Matty Van Sevenot last year. They have it in check. 2 minutes. They do the first Mur and bring it down to 150. And Mauri attacked Benji. Did you expect him to do that? Because I thought it was like the most bang on likely things to happen in this race is Van Seven attacking obscenely early.
Yeah, I was expecting something throughout the race. I wasn't expecting him to wait until the last moment because we know that that team has Alaphilippe. They're going to use Alaphilippe for the final Mur de Huy, so they can try and use their other candidates to try and just spice up the race beforehand, make sure that other teams need to chase their riders without really too much problems. Because, well, if you send Van Zevenand up the road, or even the likes of an Honoré, for example, you're forcing other teams to pace, but you're not necessarily losing a pawn of your game on the Mur de Huy, because we all know you don't need too many domestiques on the Mur de Huy in the end, because usually riders take it on their own because of the positioning advantage that it gives. So, yeah, I think that it was a clear-cut thing to happen. I don't think it was going to go anywhere, despite me being a large fanatic of Belgian young cyclists. It was cool to see. And I think after Amstel, I think that he's gaining a lot of following internationally, and people are really liking how he rides very offensively. Yeah. And I love how he said after Amstel the following sentence: do you think you're going to be a co-leader in the next Ardennes race, for example? And he said, well, I don't really care. I just want to ride, and I just want to ride in between and see where I land. And I like that, because it's like the most non-calculated racing we've seen in a while. And it's the same thing with Pogačar last year, where he was very offensive when he's behind. And that kind of stuff sparks interest in, I think, in cycling itself. And if those kind of riders make the sport more interesting, then a lot of more people will enjoy the sport, I think.
And he did prompt a few attacks. I think Geschke attacked, Tao Gegenhardt, and another Ineos rider got in that group. But I think there was a crash as well with Pidcock behind at this same time. And Gegenhardt was pulling, but then Pidcock got back into the peloton. There was 50 seconds for the 5 riders in front. Even Philippe Gilbert threw an attack in Benji. 20 Ks to go, 25 seconds, and you already know it's going to be Mur de Huy bunch time, because you need like 50 seconds at the base of the Mur if you've been in the break. And as well, they're going to bring it back even earlier than that, because it's not a long race. It's not that hard typically. And all these teams have so many domestiques in the last 20 kilometers. That's what makes the big difference. And they just keep it so tight and bring everything back. Tim Wellens tried to attack with 11.5 Ks to go, and Carapaz tried to follow him. So Quick-Step and Ineos had tried to throw a few riders up the road. Roglic didn't really have too many people to bring it back, apart from Omen. He did a decent job actually bringing Carapaz back. Carapaz attacked again, and we'll talk about his result later and how well he did. Lambertink was the last rider, I think, up the road. 2 Ks to go. 11-second gap, close right at the base, just on cue. And Quick-Step attacked with Honoré with 1,300 meters to go. And I mean, you probably got time. Go and look at the last K on Tour de France ASO's YouTube channel. Will be up soon. You know, it'll take you 3 minutes. But interesting from Quick-Step attacking like that with Honoré, rather to put Ineos and Cosnefroy and Azure Desert Citroën under pressure. Barry was dropped. And the pace came out of the race a little bit, it seemed. Kwiatkowski was pacing. Israel had a rider pacing for Mike Woods, their contender for today. And then with 400 meters to go, Valverde was out of position. We'll talk about him in a second. 400 meters to go, Rogla, who was in good position. And Jumbo-Visma did a good job today, generally. I thought they did a really good job for Roglic, keeping in fantastic position. He accelerates like we always see him do, a little bit early. 400 to go. Still a long time on the Mur de Huy. 400 meters. He's got Alaphilippe and Valverde looking at him. Alaphilippe doesn't react. No movement at all. Doesn't even get out of the saddle. Just lets Pidcock close that gap a little bit. Alaphilippe's got Valverde on his wheel. Let's Pidcock bring him to 270. Roglic has got a decent gap on them at this point. It's his patented 100-meter big sprint. Then Alaphilippe begins a slow bridge, gradual bridge, to Roglic, not panicking at any moment, always under control, and we can see him clawing him back. He's got Valverde on the wheel, drops him off the wheel with 125 to go, and then we see him in Roglic's wheel with 75 meters to go, as they're just cresting the steep section at the end, and it flattens off, and we know it's over for Roglic. Alaphilippe kicking out of his wheel, and it's more a marathon, even though it's a short climb. Alaphilippe just able to hold that same speed and power right until the finish, and Roglic fading. Alaphilippe coming first, Roglic second, Valverde third, I think Woods fourth, or Barguil fourth, and Woods fifth. Benji, Roglic, do you think he was surprised Valverde was there? He seemed kind of shocked and then tried to re-kick with 50 meters to go. And if so, do you actually think that made a difference?
You mean Alaphilippe, right? Not Valverde? Or
yeah, sorry. When Roglic had Alaphilippe come up next to him on the left-hand side. Yep.
I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure it's a surprise necessarily. I think that he knows that if he goes so early on the Mur de Huy, which to some is arguably a mistake, because I bet every single rider before this year is going to say, if you attack early on the Mur de Huy, then you're basically putting the nail in your own coffin. They're going to counter you, and they're going to come past you the moment that they launch their kick on the rather just the point where it goes from very steep to not super steep. That's where Alaphilippe usually launches, and today he had to go a bit earlier to launch towards Roglic. I think that he probably was not surprised that Alaphilippe was there. He was probably hoping that he wouldn't be there, obviously. But I think in total, the topic I just want to bring up is, did Roglic go too early or not? And there's a few aspects to this. Like I just mentioned, on the Mur de Huy, you're typically waiting until it is at that point where everybody usually launches, and Alaphilippe usually launches. A few years ago, Alaphilippe lost the race by launching a bit too early, and today he had to go early because Roglic went way earlier than everybody, and that forces the others into actually responding, because they know that if Roglic makes that move, if he gaps them so much on that steeper section, then they need to find some hella crazy kick to get back to him and pass him on the last section. But on the opposite side, you can also say, perhaps this is the best thing that Roglic could do. Perhaps going early is the best thing that Roglic can do, because he does not have the sprint acceleration against Alaphilippe on the last section. But I would counter to that, we don't actually know that well, because we've seen them ride against each other in a punching way on Liège last year, and we saw it as well on the World Champs. On the World Champs, we had them both having ridden the Tour de France just before, right? Was that Tour de France? Yes, it was Tour de France.
Yes.
And as a consequence, you had Roglic who went all out in the Tour de France, Alaphilippe who was preparing for the World Champs throughout the Tour de France. That was his goal. He said that. The first part, after that first victory, he said that he was focusing on the World Champs. So we don't know if Roglic would have also prepared for the World Champs, how close he would have gotten on that final punch and that final kick where Alaphilippe got away. And I think it's interesting to think about, because we don't know what would happen if they launched both at the same time on the Mur de Huy. I dare to put my money on the fact that I just don't know, and that it could be either one of them, because I would really like to see Roglic and Alaphilippe launch from that corner, the last corner, at the same time, and see where it lands, because some people are saying that Alaphilippe would outkick Roglic. From the history of Alaphilippe, that's possible, but we haven't seen him against Roglic like that many occasions, and I think it could be different than people are thinking, and I think that we're underestimating Roglic, and I think Roglic might be underestimating himself here on this finish, because I'm scared of what he can do. The man launched early and he still almost won.
Yeah, I don't think he went 300 meters too early, but just a little bit too early. I think that's inarguable when you look at his speed, like how he slowed down and was kind of cooked in the last 30 to 50 meters. So it's not like he jumped incredibly early for him and what he can do, but just a little bit early, and that was the difference between him and Alaphilippe. And Benji, I'm looking on Twitter, apparently we have a climbing record. Yep, they did 2:41 for the Mur de Huy, 6 seconds quicker than Hirschi last year, 9 seconds quicker than Alaphilippe last year in 2019. Yes?
I think that's the same amount, 241, that Valverde did in his not so clean year. Exactly the same time back in the day.
2014.
Yeah.
He was clean then.
Was he? Okay, I'm getting the years wrong then. But that does mean
that's
that
post Puerto, mate.
Is it a climbing record then?
Well, in principle, sort of, because it's a harder course now than apparently when Valverde did 241.
Okay, yeah.
So it's more impressive what they did, and that was largely down to Roglic. But yeah, crazy level, and it goes to show, like, we're like, oh, maybe Roglic went a little bit early, but in almost any other year and a lot of other eras, he would have won. So by like 5 seconds. So he's crazy level puncher, Roglic. Super impressive from him. One thing I want to mention, Benji, is, speaking of Valverde, he should have been disqualified in my view. He came third. That's, classic podium out of Woods and Barguil. Top 10, by the way: Pidcock, Guru, Chavez, Carapaz, Sharkman. Third, he was so far out of position. We said it was a problem in Amstel. I think in my video I was like, oh, way out of position, Valverde. Yep. Then he managed to, super impressive on the last Cauberg, that he even managed to get into G1 for a time. And today he was so far out of position again with 600 meters to go, and he used the sidewalk to move up the right-hand side. No other riders did. He was behind Pidcock beforehand, used the sidewalk and moved up to about third wheel behind Alaphilippe. And when he came back off the sidewalk, he nearly chopped Pidcock and nearly crashed because he was going into a space that wasn't there. And the rules do not mandate that you are disqualified just because you go onto the sidewalk, but in serious cases, or if an infringement offers an advantage, the commissaires may relegate the rider to last place or eliminate or disqualify them. It offered an advantage. He only went on that sidewalk to move up spots because his team weren't good enough to keep him at the front before the Mur de Huy. And it affected Pidcock's race. It definitely gave him an advantage. And Benji, how surprised, aka not surprised at all, are you that he didn't get sanctioned?
I'm not surprised at all. And to be honest, if you're thinking about it, I think that it's also just not a very effective penalty, because in this one-day race, why would he care that he gets DQ'd if he doesn't win anyway? It's Valverde. He's got plenty of a history anyway. The thing that would hurt him the most is the fine and the UCI ranking points, but he also won't care about those, to be honest. UCI ranking points, perhaps. Valverde sometimes cares about the UCI ranking if he's close to the top. But, yeah.
And if he doesn't move up, he can't win. Yeah. Because he'd be so deep.
I do it as well. No, with this penalty, I do it as well. Like, why not? Yeah.
You're choosing between 99% not being sanctioned and improving your position, or staying behind and definitely losing. So it's a no-brainer for him to do it. It's just one of those things. I think Rowe got penalised for it at Flanders a few years ago, but generally they only penalise you if you actually endanger another rider, or a spectator. But he kind of really chopped Pidcock or another rider. So, yeah, that was a bit of a shame. But Alaphilippe, Benji, I think I was saying he didn't look at the same on the Cauberg. He didn't have that snap back today, climbing record. What do you think of Liège? Do you think he's just a Mur Flèche specialist, his third win? Or do you think he's the hot favourite for Liège like he was maybe last year?
The Mur de Huy is perfect for him, I think. I think that he is obviously the best puncher on paper, I'd say, in the world, Alaphilippe. And that is solely because we haven't seen Roglic do like the full Ardennes. Let's say that Roglic ends up dropping everybody on LBL on La Redoute. Well, that might change. But overall, throughout the entire season, once Alaphilippe is on a start list with a hill in the end, with roughly 1.5k of climbing, we know that he's likely going to end up in the winning seat of that. if he's well placed and so forth, obviously. But punching wise, he's one of the best. Roglic, it's kind of difficult to like post him next to that because we're used to all these years where all these GC riders would never ride the likes of an Ardennes or only Liège, and then they'd like drop with 20k to go because they're not in form yet. But we have seen such a change with the Slovenian gods that came in and basically threw everything around. And we saw that at Strade with Pogacar being strong there, Bernal being strong there. We saw that with Bernal at the Italian Classics 4 years ago, but also with, well, Roglic in this situation, Liège last year as well, although that was a different calendar. I think that we're seeing such a difference in how these riders focus on more than just the Tour. Pogacar said it as well a few weeks ago. There's more to the season than the Tour de France. It's always like, oh no. But like all in all, I think that it's beautiful to see because there is more to cycling than the Tour de France. And many mainstream viewers probably have like the Tour de France as their highest regarded thing. And people that aren't really like the mainstream cycling following, but the ones that just watch cycling once and so on, those are the ones that probably only watch those races or local races. And yeah, it's lovely that it's becoming more popular to watch more than just the Tour de France. And I like that.
Yeah, maybe not Flèche though. Might not be the best.
The last 2 kilometers, okay?
The best alternative, Jesus. All right, that was our men's Flèche Wallonne recap. If you're listening on podcast players, stay tuned for the women's recap coming up now. But otherwise, if you're listening on YouTube, like the video down below or leave us a review on podcast players. But here's the women's recap.